Hey there everyone, CPO here. I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to skip ahead a bit and jump straight to my dyno session after the turbo upgrade. So after the turbo install, I installed a beta MPI kit along with the Euro version intake manifold. Don't worry, I'll have video detailing the manifold swap coming soon, and once I get the final production version of the MPI kit, I'll also have a video on that. I also upgraded my spark plugs, upgraded the map and put sensors, and I did an oil change. I installed the base tune from EQT, and then I loaded up the car with E85 fuel because I was going to get tuned on that as well. I already had 93 octane in the tank. Then I drove out to Powertech Performance in St. Pete for a day of custom dyno tuning with Ed Susman himself from Equilibrium Tuning. Powertech is a cool shop, and judging from the cars in the bays, it looks like that's where everyone takes their vets for performance work. I rented time on their two-wheel dyno, and a chill dude named Chase hung out with me all day at the dyno. Now, because I have an R, I used my Vanderveer Haldex controller to disable the Haldex so the car would operate in front-wheel drive mode only. Don't worry, I have a video on that controller in the works as well. So Chase, my designated dyno operator, did the heavy lifting while I focused on capturing logs to send to Ed in exchange for tune revisions that I would load back into the Cobb access port. This process went back and forth for several revisions until we found a good solid stopping point on the 93 octane fuel. But it was essentially a back and forth of doing a pull on the dyno, sending a log to Ed with a picture of the dyno result, and then waiting for a revision which repeats the process. The dyno data was critical for Ed to be able to target specific torque values, which in my case was a maximum of 450 thanks to my stock block. All right, so here's where we ended up with the 93 octane tune. Pretty respectable, I'd say, at 465 wheel horsepower and 420 wheel torque. Now I can swap fuels and we can start tuning for E85, which is my normal fuel. So I've done a video on this previously, but to swap fuels, I just disconnect the fuel line at the ethanol sensor, and then I attach a hose that will allow me to use the car's low pressure fuel pump to pump fuel directly into fuel cans. I used OBD11 and the empty fuel tank function. You'll also notice that I put the battery on a charger for this because that fuel pump pulls a lot of amperage and I didn't want it to just sit and drain my battery. It probably wasn't necessary, but it makes me feel better. I brought 10 gallons of E85 with me in 2 fuel cans. That should sufficiently dilute any remaining 93 octane fuel that's left in the tank. Once I swapped fuels, I ran the car for a while, also giving it just a little RPM boost to speed the process, until the remaining 93 was purged from the fuel lines. I watched the ethanol gauge that I have mounted in my cubby until it started to rise about above E25 or so. Then I switched tunes to the E85 base tune, which I assume is built off the last 93 tune Ed made for me. I then continued to let the car idle until that E content rose to as high as it was going to go before we started tuning. Since the ethanol content from the pump is usually around E75 for me, I was looking to get at least above E70 for the tuning process, accounting for that little bit of leftover 93 octane in the tank. Once I got to about E70 on the gauge, I called Chase back over and we started to get after it again. The very first pull on the base tune was a pretty significant jump over the last 93 octane pull, jumping straight to nearly 500 wheel horsepower. That's definitely headed in the right direction. I got a few revisions from Ed before we hit the max power level for that session. That pull took advantage of every bit of maximum torque target of 450 and then hit 540 wheel horsepower. We did notice there looked to be some fueling cuts at higher RPMs when we got to that level. Ed's thinking is that the factory fuel line from the tank was starting to be the limitation. Yeah, I didn't get that upgraded fuel line in time for my tuning session. So we ran a couple more pulls and Ed was trying to work around the fueling limits, but things were not improving. So we decided to call it a day and pick things back up when I upgraded the fuel line. So I did eventually get the new fuel line, but I just haven't been able to get it installed because of my crazy schedule. Hopefully I can get that in soon and we can see how that changes things. In the meantime, I have a handful of videos left to edit for you guys, so I'll be working on those as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.